Hey there, Fatty, and everyone listening to the Leadville 100 podcast. Hottie here, just finishing up making my smoothie, my go-to recovery drink. Now, you know, there's a lot of stuff in this thing that might gross you out a little bit. It's a green smoothie, so there's broccoli in here, and spinach, and a carrot, and avocado, ice, almond milk. You know, there's even salt in here too to bring out the flavor. But of course, it also has my one secret favorite ingredient. Actually, it's no longer a secret on this show anymore. It's Floyd's of Leadville, their recovery protein mix. We love this stuff, Fatty and I, especially after a hard ride or a hard day in the gym or what have you, because A, it has protein, and a good protein. It has whey isolate protein. And over time and time again, whey protein has been proven to be the best recovery tool for your muscles, if indeed you're going to do a powdered formula, which this is. It's a powdered formula. I like the vanilla mix for my green smoothie here. There's also a chocolate mix, but I use vanilla in the green smoothie because kind of chocolate and broccoli don't really sound too good. But the vanilla is great. This is the vanilla flavor I use in my green smoothie. What else what do we have here in the recovery protein mix? Well, Floyd's also uses a branched chain, a full amino acid profile, but in particular, they have 8.5 grams of branched chain amino acids. Now, the important thing about BCAAs is your body cannot make these particular 3 amino acids. So it's important you get them in your diet. They're part of the building blocks for protein, and you need to get them. They also can help with a lot of other things regarding fatigue and, of course, recovery. So BCAAs, and I've had a lot of protein powders in my life. I've never seen anybody with 8.5 grams of BCAAs in them. So hats off to Floyd's for going that route. Now, of course, as always, in all of Floyd's products, you've got their secret ingredient, and that is CBD. In this particular case, for the recovery protein powder, you have 25 milligrams of CBD in here. So not a lot, actually. You could actually do a protein drink and maybe a capsule and be good to go. Relax and recover, get your protein, fix your muscles, get ready to ride again. And if you'd like, do it in a smoothie, a green one, if you must, like me. Get your veggies too, you know. Hey, go to floydsofleadville.com. Check out all their recovery products, including my favorite, the recovery protein powder in vanilla. That's floydsofleadville.com. Use the code FATTY for a 15% discount. And thanks again to Floyd's of Leadville for sponsoring the show. Now, I'm going to enjoy this smoothie, and you enjoy this podcast. Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race, presented by Floyd's of Leadville. This is Season 2, Episode 12 of the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest and hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country. I'm Michael Houghton, a.k.a. Hottie. He is Eldon Nelson, a.k.a. Fatty.
Yeah, and we've got another packed show lined up, Hottie, with Roxanne Vogel, our nutrition expert, who's going to sort of take a little bit of a side trip from her usual nutrition topic and talk about altitude prep. She is getting ready for an assault on Everest and has some very Leadville relative relatable tips for us. Also, Jonathan Lee of TrainerRoad is back with a breakdown of your upcoming training block, which he says should be the hardest 3 weeks of your entire Leadville preparation. I can attest to that.
And we will revisit a favorite topic here on the show, 1-by versus 2-by. Yay for that. This time we get an assist from our friends at Shimano. I sit down with the head of their mountain bike division to try and sort out the specs and which spec might be better for you, 1-by or 2-by.
And before we get into all of that, Hottie, I want to follow up on something you and I've talked about a little bit before, and the listeners have asked about, and that is riding in Leadville. a lot of us head over into Leadville the week before the big race. And while we're there, the temptation to check out the course is just overwhelming. I do every single time. So I was thinking, what if a bunch of us, the hosts and listeners of this show, got together a time or two to ride some of the course together? Like maybe ride up and down Columbine early in the week, maybe doing easy Kevins and Boulevard as we get closer to race day. And, maybe even a Q&A episode of the show where everyone can ask us their freaked out last minute questions about the race. And we'll just all sort of get together and build up this anxious energy and, eventually scream and run out of the room.
Yeah, pre-riding should be part of that week leading into Leadville,
Yep.
as long as you take it easy. But certainly there's something to be learned, and sharing a few notes with your fellow Leadvillers, always a good idea. We do a lot of talking to you, our listeners, and it would be fun actually to meet you and have a talk back. Maybe you yell back at us. I don't care. I won't be getting into Leadville until I'm actually racing the week before Leadville in Oregon. So looks like my arrival time will be Tuesday-ish before the race. So I may not make it to that first ride. Besides, you guys are going up to Columbine, and you know how I feel about that.
I know that you will miss us very much. So I plan on getting into town a full week before the race. So maybe, listeners who are going to also be arriving early, they could go for a ride with me. And then you and I could maybe lead another group ride and a Q&A show once you get into town.
Yeah, let's see if our folks are interested. If you're going to be in Leadville for the Leadville 100, either as crew, like me, or racing, like Fatty, and you'd be interested in joining us for a ride or two and maybe a Q&A show, leave us a comment in the Facebook post for this show or in the Leadville100podcast.com comment section, or text us at 719-453-1514. 719-453-1514. If we see enough interest, maybe we'll all go for a ride. Fatty, we are both coming off big weekend rides. I did the Chino Grinder near Prescott, Arizona, and that's how they say it there, by the way. Not Prescott, but Prescott, Arizona. And you did the White Rim, and that's how they say it there, White Rim, in your home state of Utah. I started my 114-miler with a few things from our friends at the feed: a bonk breaker bar, some goo energy gels, and a bottle of 320 Morton drink mix, I should say, the magical calorie hydration formula that we both just love. Yeah. My strategy was to carry less and rely more on the neutral stops for the rest of my food. Bad strategy, Hottie. The stuff I found at the rest stops, no offense to the Chino Grinder, was what I would call whatever they found at a Walmart. It wasn't long before an afternoon of eating that stuff, I had a good case of food fatigue, and I was longing for another bottle or two of Morton drink mix.
Yeah, that is a really tempting and common mistake to make. You want to, ride light. You want to maybe use what they have and not spend your own money. And nobody likes to carry a bunch of stuff for their big all-day rides. But I have learned that what you experienced and what I've done before, that alternative is a lot worse. I did start my day with a bonk breaker and then fueled on bike with the Morton 160 in my bottles and then plain water in my hydration pack. And I had a goo Roctane every half hour. It's my tried and true fueling and hydration technique. And even carrying 10 hours of fuel and water on my back, because it is a true no support, self-support, carry everything you're going to need for the whole day wilderness ride. I had no problems at all, which gives me a lot of confidence for going with this exact same eating strategy, drinking strategy for my upcoming races, Silver Rush, Crusher, and of course, the Leadville 100. This is how I race, and it's how I train, and it works for me. Figuring out your own food and drink strategy, you got to do it while you train, and then you know it, and you do it, and it works for you on race day too. So thanks for our partners at the feed. It has been years since I have had to worry about GI issues on the bike, and that is a wonderful thing.
It's worth noting our podcast listeners can get a great price on a pack curated for Leadville racers containing a lot of the items we just mentioned. Go to thefeed.com/Leadville for our Leadville pack, and be sure to use the code Leadville15 for a 15% discount. You can also use that Leadville15 code for buying any amount of Morton at a 15% discount. I'll be using that product. Fatty will be using that product during all of our races this year.
Heck yeah. Once again, that is thefeed.com/Leadville, and use that Leadville15 code at checkout.
There are two prominent equipment questions, Fatty, surrounding the Leadville Trail 100 mountain bike race. There's hardtail or full suspension and 1x versus 2x.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's safe to say there is no right, no wrong answer here. Regarding gearing, Fatty, last year you went with a 1x setup. I take it you've gone the other way too.
Yeah, I think that I actually have gone with every possible gearing setup at one time or another in Leadville. I've raced single speed a few times, and just sort of as a by the way, 33x19 is what I would consider the perfect gearing setup if you have the legs for it. My fastest time in 812 was on a 2x11 Shimano XTR Di2 setup a couple years ago. I was riding a Cannondale FSI Black, a gorgeous bike with an amazing drivetrain. Last year, I rode a 1x11 XT Di2, once again, from our good friends in Shimano. And if you look even further back in history, I think I've done everything else, including, I believe, my first year was a 3x8. I don't even know if that's possible to get any longer. Anyway, this year I'm going to be riding with a new Shimano XTR racing a 1x12. I've got all the components actually sitting right here beside me on my desk, along with my specialized Epic hardtail frame. I'm just waiting for my wheels and fork, and then I'm going to build up a bike. I am so not worthy of Hottie. My big question is 32 teeth up front or 34. I'm going to do some experimenting and decide a little closer to race day. How about you? Are you more in the 1x or 2x camp or 3x?
Well, right now, I mean, my current bike is a 1x bike, but it's not a Leadville bike. I've always been a 2x rider at Leadville. At the time when I raced, the range was just a little better with the 2x setup versus the 1x. 1x was still kind of new.
Yeah.
Well, that has all changed now, of course. We have cassettes with 50 or more teeth, 12 speeds, and an assortment of chain rings. Still, though, I think an argument can be made for the tighter shifts offered by the 2x system. Well, if this is still a dilemma for you, then maybe our next interview can help. All right, Leadvillers, we're here at the Sea Otter Classic, and we've stopped by the Shimano booth to help you out, help you make a decision, which is often a big dilemma when racing the Leadville 100, and that is 1x versus 2x. Of course, you know, Shimano's a big supporter of the podcast, so we wanted to get here with Nick Murdoch, who is the mountain bike product specialist for Shimano, to help us decide, do I need a front derailleur? Do I not? What type of rider? What type of race? Does a 2x favor versus a 1x? And good news here, of course, is Shimano makes both. So Nick, you've probably heard this dilemma yourself. Maybe you've faced it yourself. 1x versus 2x. Compare and contrast the two. Can you tell us which rider it might favor, which type of race either system might favor?
For sure, yeah, and it's great to talk to you about this in this context because for sure we got some eyebrows raised when we announced the new XTR 12-speed group and positioned it as like a race-specific group, but then there was a new 2x12 system in there, which kind of looked a little bit strange, especially when you're positioning XTR as a race-specific group. But the reason that it's around is very specifically for marathon cross-country racing. And as long as there was still somebody out there that would benefit from a double over a single, needed a little bit more range than a single could provide, or were sensitive enough to the gear steps that they didn't want to start making sacrifices there, that's who the double is for. And even if it's a shrinking market, then we wanted to support that kind of racing.
What's the increased range? If I decide to go with a 2x12 system, what in Shimano's, what is the increased range I might get there?
There are numbers that can describe it, and you can do the math if you think that way. But really, I think the way to think about it is in terms of what your easiest gear on the bike is and what your hardest gear is on the bike. So with our, the basics of the new XTR drivetrain is a 12-speed cassette, and the wide-range cassette is a 1051, so 12 steps. The last 3 shifts, as you get to the easiest gear, start to get a little bit bigger so that we can get that extra range. If we had the perfect size gear step all the way across the cassette, you'd end up with a 12-speed 1045 cassette. So we also make that. So kind of that's your first choice, is do you want the rhythm step cassette or the wide-range cassette? If you want the rhythm step cassette, and also want wide range, then that's where we start to get into the double range. That's the one that you would pair with a front derailleur. But then when you get a 2x system, you basically get the lowest low gear that we offer with a single ring system and the highest high gear that we offer with a single ring system. So the double is, since it's paired with such a wide range 12-speed cassette, it's just available in a 28-38. Those are the chainring combinations. So 28-45 would be your lowest gear, about the same as like a 30-51, which is the lowest gear that we offer for XTR. And the tallest gear, the highest gear, the fastest gear is a 38-10, which is exactly the same as the highest gear that we offer for a single ring system. So if you want the entire range of gear that's available to you, then a double is the way to do it.
Can I run the 51 on a double? Is that what you're saying, or is that not?
You can't. No, and you wouldn't want to either, especially since you typically transition from the big chainring to the small chainring after you've run out of gears on the cassette. So you're fully cross-chained, and if you were in that 38-51 and then you drop down to the small chainring, you'd need a correction shift in the front. But since those last couple of shifts are like really a shift and a half, then it doesn't work out so well. Like, it's kind of this awkward, you feel like you're stuck in between gears if you don't have the perfect rhythm step cassette. So you would want to have that 1045 12-speed cassette if you had a front derailleur to make the transition between chainrings feel super smooth. And that was something that we started doing with the previous generation, that we found that 10-tooth difference between the chainring sizes is almost exactly equal to 2 rear shifts. So if you want to get one easier gear after you've run out of easy gears on the big chainring, then 1 front shift and 1 rear shift, and it just feels like you've done 1 more shift.
It sounds like the first thing you want to decide in your mind is what do I need out of my system? Do I need shifts that have smaller jumps, or am I okay with the jumps and I want simplicity? Is that kind of the first thing you should settle in your mind?
Keep it in mind for sure. I think that's maybe one of the easier things for people to compromise on. So I would kind of form an opinion on it and stay flexible. And really, I think the choice gets made from the range of gears that you need. And I always try to kind of keep it in that context, because it's easy to kind of go down the wrong track if you're just thinking about how fast am I ever going to need to go, and then what am I willing to give up in terms of an easy gear? Or the way that most people set up their mountain bike, they think about the easiest gear that they need on their bike, and then everything else gets dictated by that. So if you're going to do a really challenging course like Leadville, and maybe you need a really easy gear like a 30-51 if it was a single, or a 28-45 if it was a double, then that's kind of where you start. And so and for me, setting up my marathon cross-country bike, that's exactly where I started. Was I know I'm going to need the easiest gear that is available. So if it's a single, it's going to be a 30-tooth chainring, because I need to get up those mountains. And then the next question, and this is where I've actually gone back and forth between a single and double myself, is how fast am I going to need to go? So if there's a course that's maybe got a slightly downhill pavement section, especially if it's early on and you don't want to fall off the group, or if there's going to be a sprint at the finish, that you would need a taller gear, right? So going back to my example, my bike I know is going to have a 30-tooth chainring with that 1051 cassette. So thinking about what my top gear is going to be, that's a 3010, and you can pedal that up to like 25 miles an hour. And sometimes I need to be able to pedal faster than that. So I've got a choice: either put a front derailleur on the bike, or push harder on the climbs, or be okay with getting dropped on those faster sections of the trail. So that's kind of where there's still conundrum, and it gets very difficult to solve that problem with just a single chainring solution.
Right. Yeah, well, wouldn't you know it, Leadville does have a fast downhill paved ascent right after the first climb,
Yep.
and that does require you. I mean, most one-bike people are going to be spun out on that thing, and that's probably one of the areas of the course where you're thinking, darn, 2x would be really cool right here. That said, at what point would you tell a racer, an endurance racer, 1x is the right choice for you? Is it only for the strong guys, or is there some flex there?
No, and I don't even know that there's a hard and fast rule that like fast guys use doubles or fast guys use singles or slow people use one or the other. Like it really just comes down to the range, like your riding style, what's important to you. For sure, on most marathon cross-country races that I end up doing, I end up with a single chainring and a 30-tooth chainring, so I just don't pedal that fast. And kind of depends on the course, though. But if so it's a fresh consideration every time. The kind of good news, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but it's really easy to switch the new crank between a single and a double.
Right, that's what I was going to get to. Look, if I can't make up my mind, I can have it both ways with a little wrenching.
Yeah, for sure. So the new cranks are all a direct mount system, and so if it's a single chainring, then it's just splines on and a lock ring. The double, the big chainring is actually a direct mount chainring, and the small chainring just bolts straight to it, and you can totally switch back and forth super easy. The rear derailleur that you would need for the front double, like it's got a little bit longer cage so that it can take up the chain slack. No problem running that on a single chainring system either. Like it's designed to be modular, and the penalty of carrying around an extra couple of millimeters of derailleur cage is like 3 grams. Like it's not that big of a deal. So it's super easy to just, you pull out the crank, you take off the double chainring, put on the single chainring, take off the left shifter, and don't need to do anything really to your chain length or your rear derailleur, anything like that. Just kind of pop off some stuff and you can go back and forth really easily. And that's exactly what I do on my bike, depending on what I'm going to use it for.
Yeah, so we love being modular these days, right? Yeah. Having our cake and eating it too. Having our XDR and eating it too is again, for the Leadville crowd, that seems like the group set that's going to offer them the most options to get this race done.
Right. I mean, that's who we made it for. But I think, it's a race group. And like I said, we made a marathon race group too. But I don't know that everybody's doing Leadville for the same reason. Like if you're out there for an adventure to challenge yourself, then I wouldn't expect you to go out and buy a new group so that you could make your bike more racy when you identify as somebody who's just going to go out there and challenge yourself and have an adventure. Like if XT is a better all-around performer for what you put on your bike all the time, then I would absolutely run that.
All right, Nick, thanks so much for being part of the Leadville show. Thanks for supporting the podcast and for your tips regarding marathon mountain biking and gear setup.
All right. Thank you very much for having me.
That's a great interview you had there with Nick, Hottie. I got to say, I'm happy with the 1x12 selection that I am making with my XTR for this year. 51 tooth ring in back should give me all kinds of range. But I can see why a 2x makes sense for a lot of people for Leadville.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and thanks again to Nick Murdoch for taking time at Sea Otter. Go to bike.shimano.com for more. We will also have a link in the show notes for this episode at Leadville100podcast.com. The other day I was out on a group gravel ride, in fact, and someone said to me, "What's in the bag, Hottie?" He meant what was in my Banjo Brothers frame bag. Naturally, I revealed its contents: food, phone, wallet, spare tube, multi-tool, tubeless plugs, popsicle sticks, zip ties, vest, basically everything. I know you're wondering about the popsicle sticks, right?
I am.
Mud. Scrape mud off with them.
Oh,
Not that we get a lot of mud here in SoCal, but I carry them anyhow. You never know. To say the least, he was impressed. I told him, "Hey, check out Banjo Brothers, bro." Get it? Brothers, bro.
bro. Oh yeah, I get it. I while you're saying that, I'm sort of picturing you with a almost like a magic trick top hat magician thing where you just keep pulling things out of the bag. It sounds like that.
Watch me pull a rabbit out of my Banjo Brothers bag. No, really. I cram all kinds of things into that frame bag. Mine is the medium. Now, they also have a large and a small. The cool thing about the small and the mediums, Fatty, is that they are shaped in a way that they still allow clearance for both bottle cages.
Oh yeah, that is so important. You don't want to have to fuss while you're trying to get your bottle back into its cage. I think it's worth pointing out that by getting a frame bag and setting it up the way that you have, you've sort of automatically become the most popular person on any group ride that you're going on because you are the rider who is ready when things go bad or when someone needs a popsicle stick. It's sort of the way everyone with a pickup truck always has lots of friends.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's a pickup truck for the bike. Anyway, you can get 15% off your Banjo Brothers frame bag or any other order by going to banjobrothers.com/fatty-favorite. Banjo Brothers is tough, practical, and affordable. Minneapolis-based. They've been in business since 2003. They're great guys.
Oh, they are.
To get 15% off your order, go to banjobrothers.com/fatty-favorites.
Hey, Hottie, I have got a tricky word of the day for you. Nunburnholm.
Nunburnholm?
Nunburnholm. I'm not sure that either of us have pronounced it right, and honestly, it's the first time I've ever tried. It's a village and a parish in the East Riding of Yorkshire, England. At least that's what it says it is according to Wikipedia. But to me, Nunburnholm, or more specifically, Nunburnholm +3, will always be the name of the TrainerRoad workout I did this morning. That is 9 4-minute intervals at around 110% of my FTP, each followed by 4 minutes of recovery. I tell you, it was not an easy 90 minutes of my life.
No, it wasn't. Well, the good news is you're doing what you ought to be doing right now, and it's not supposed to be easy, especially if you're getting ready for Leadville. In fact, right now, your training is about as hard as it's going to get. And we've got Coach Jonathan Lee with TrainerRoad to explain what kind of training you should be doing right now.
Jonathan, welcome back to the Leadville podcast. It's always great to have you here.
Thanks, Eldon. I'm happy to be here. It's kind of getting, I guess we're not at crunch time, but we're definitely changing the training around in the next few weeks here. So it's an exciting time.
So even coaches get nervous about the Leadville 100? I know you're doing it this year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's funny. My main goal for the year is cross-country nationals. We've covered this before this year on the podcast, but
sure.
If you ask which one gives me more anxiety, it's Leadville, absolutely. Especially because the long stuff is usually much more brutal on my body. I mean, it's brutal on everyone's body, but I'm a bit of a snowflake, a tender ninny, some might say. So this long stuff is pretty tough for me. So yeah, it looms large, that's for sure. And yeah, it makes me nervous.
Jonathan, we're less than 3 months away from the second Saturday in August, which is Leadville Trail 100 Day. Where should we be in our training right now?
Yeah, at this point, you're at the end or nearing the end of your build phase of training. This is all vernacular that we use here at TrainerRoad. We break up your whole year of training into 3 consecutive phases, like we've talked about in earlier episodes. The build phase is the middle one, but it's also the most difficult one in many regards. It's where we really push your body the hardest and make the biggest gains. And the way we do that is by progressively loading your body with training stress for 1 to 3 weeks. It usually goes 1 week, then the next week is a little harder. Then the one after that is even harder. And then the 4th week, we give you a rest week where it's lower intensity, shorter workouts. And we let your body kind of catch up and absorb all that fitness that you, or all that stress that you've been working on, and then turns it into fitness. So right now you're entering, or you should be entering if you're following the training plan, on to the T, so to speak, you should be entering the final one. So this is going to be probably the hardest 3 weeks of training that you'll have the next 3 weeks for the entire year. But it's the type of stuff that really, makes Leadville a much easier endeavor. It's going to raise that threshold so that when you are going up Columbine and you're forced to just put out whatever wattage you have to put out just to stay upright going up that thing, it's hopefully going to be a lower percentage of your threshold because of all the hard work you did during this phase.
Yeah. It is so hard for me to adhere to a plan. And as you know, I'm a serious TrainerRoad addict. I am a big fan.
Mm-hmm.
But it is so difficult this far out for me to look forward, 2+ months and say to myself, I should start easing off even now. I keep in my, my own personal compass says, no, you keep going harder all the time.
Yeah.
That you only get stronger by working harder.
Yeah, and so that is true to a certain extent, right? In the sense that you do have to push your limits. Training just basically functions on the whole concept that you have to dose your body with more work than what it's used to, and you have to stretch its limits and then give it time to catch up and then repeat that cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically what it is. But when you look at it at a larger scale, every time you dose that body with stress, the freshness disappears, right? It becomes less and less fresh, and we feel that. So when we get out of this build phase, which you've got 4 weeks left in this build phase, so 3 hard weeks of training, then 1 recovery week. When we get out of this build phase, you're going to go into the specialty phase, and you'll notice that your overall training stress is going to drop. It's not going to be as high as what you once did, which, like you said, Eldon, a lot of the time feels counterintuitive because you feel like the event's getting closer. So you should just continue to ramp, the whole time. But it's not what our body needs. Our body needs to have a bit more freshness, and we can make the training much more specific to what you'll see on race day. So we've talked before about the different options you can do, at least within TrainerRoad's training plans, like following the cross-country marathon plan, or the one that we usually recommend for Leadville is the Century plan for most people, because it is such a unique event with those long sustained climbs. But if you look at it, a lot of the workouts that you'll be doing in that specialty phase, you're going to be looking at 12, 15, 20, even 30-minute intervals where you'll be sitting in that sweet spot zone. We'll have you doing some VO2 work because when you have to pass people or early on in that race, you're going to be doing some VO2 work, even though we're trying to tell ourselves to go easy. It doesn't seem to ever work.
It's hard to do.
It is, right? And you'll be spending a good amount of time around threshold too, but you're not going to be doing a lot of short on-offs. You're not going to be doing extremely hard surges, up climbs, anything like that. You're going to be doing work in that specialty phase that's very specific to what you'll do on race day. And it's less about stressing the body so much with all of that and more fine-tuning the blade you already have. So you're kind of nearing the end of the hardest phase. Then after that, the specialty phase is kind of cool. You get to look forward to a little bit fresher body that you'll have and more specific training for Leadville.
Jonathan, over the next 3 weeks, a lot of people will still be including long rides in their training efforts. Should they be combining the efforts with the long rides? In other words, doing long, sustained power climbs on their long days, or should they separate the two and do interval sessions and then long ride sessions?
I always recommend that. So if you look at the training plan, depending on the volume you're following, chances are you have a weekend workout, right? If you are riding in an area that's conducive and with, the social aspect of the ride, meaning whether you're alone or whether you're with a group and the composition of that group, if all of those things allow you to do those intervals, sure, go ahead. You can combine the intervals that you have on that day with that longer outdoor ride. Otherwise, and that's pretty complex to do. I mean, we all know it's tough to execute intervals perfectly on a mountain bike when you're on a trail, right? A bit easier if you're on the road bike or if you're on some more steady gravel roads, that sort of a thing. But it's also the best way to be a jerk and hate it on your group ride is to say, hey, I'm going to do my intervals now. So
I've been there. I've done that.
Right. Yeah. We all have. So in an ideal world, I always recommend that people separate them. And that's why I like the concept of, workouts that are, 60 to 90 minutes. In some cases on your weekend rides, you'll have like a 120-minute ride, that sort of a thing. If you see that workout having a ton of specificity, meaning like the interval structure is somewhat complex and requires you to hit specific targets, and the closer it is to threshold or the higher it is above threshold, the more difficult that workout will be to replicate outside. Man, I don't know if I should say this, but I'm just going to say it. So we're working on a feature right now, actually, where you'll be able to select any of your workouts on TrainerRoad, and you'll be able to click on that on the calendar and then just hit do outside. And we've designed a workout that is an outside workout that puts the same rocks or same amount of rocks in the same fitness buckets, if you will, as the prescribed workout that you would have done indoors, but it does so with a different interval structure that's much easier to follow outside. And it gives you a text walkthrough of it, and we're working on pushing it to head units, all that stuff. So by the time this is published, I don't know if that'll be out yet, so I'm probably going to make a lot of people upset. So I apologize.
Or excited.
But
Sure.
it's an awesome feature, and that lets you execute the workouts outside that you have. Or I'm personally a huge fan of getting my interval work done on the trainer and then getting outside and riding without that stress and without the requirements of that. That's my own, I guess, personal way that I go about it, and that's really what I would recommend. But the outdoor workouts thing does make it really easy now. So,
Yeah, a nice blend between the two.
yep, and this goes to say, I won't touch on nutrition a whole lot with this, but those long outdoor rides are such a good opportunity, and even your short interval workouts, you should be taking in that nutrition, and kind of testing things out. Ride the saddle you're going to ride in the kit that you plan to ride, and that sort of a thing. To your point there, Hottie, they're going to be doing these long outdoor rides, and if you're not doing interval work, you can still be doing a lot of things for that specific preparation, like making sure that you're testing out that equipment and nutrition choice that you'll have. So,
Well, folks, it looks like your hardest days are right in front of you here. Yes, less than 3 months away from Leadville Day, but this is the hard stuff right now. You should be really feeling it as you do your rides. Again, like Jonathan said, the hardest of hard intervals are best left for indoors and in controlled environments. But look for TrainerRoad's new program, maybe something coming out where you can combine the two on your outdoor rides. Next time we get with Jonathan, this is a great topic, I think. That is, if you got a Leadville qualifier coming up, how do you time fitness for the qualifier so you do well there, yet maintain that larger goal? Keep that larger Leadville goal out there. That's next time when we get with Jonathan Lee of TrainerRoad.
Man, that dude is so smart, and he is super fast, too. I don't know if you've ever ridden with or seen Jonathan ride. He knows what he is doing, and he can walk the walk and talk the talk, or whichever way that's supposed to go. I bet you he turns in a 7:30 at Leadville. That's my prediction.
Yeah. It won't be the physical aspect that holds him back or ability. I think he has to get it in his head real quick.
Yep.
That 7:30 is within his reach. I wouldn't be surprised.
Hey, Hottie, let's play a little guessing game. I bet you win on the first try. You know the specialized epic hardtail I'm getting ready to build up? We already talked about the Shimano drivetrain I'm building it with. Now guess what wheels I'm building on this bike?
You're right. This is an easy one. I'll get this on the first try. Without question, your wheels are going to be the Envy M525.
Yeah, I did make this pretty easy for you. What's interesting is, though, I did double check on the wheels. I called Neil Shirley, who's with Envy, and obviously knows his stuff. Anyone who knows the name Neil Shirley knows. And I asked him about whether I should consider any other wheel, like even any other Envy wheel. And his answer was simple. There is no better wheel for the Leadville 100 than the Envy M525. There just isn't. And it's not just about weight either. It's not even close. The 630, another great Envy wheel, is still plenty light. And I was thinking, hey, maybe go with a slightly stronger wheel, get a little more peace of mind, lace it with a few more spokes. And Neil said that the M525 is already stronger than pretty much anything I could throw at it with a hardtail or a full suspension cross-country bike. Plus, it's a little more compliant than the 630 wheels, making it for sort of a nicer, smoother, all-day riding bike, which is what people like you and I do. Honestly, Hottie, the Envy M525 is the perfect wheel for Leadville and the other kinds of endurance mountain bike races that we do. And I'm getting custom decals to match my frame.
Purdy. Well,
Yeah.
those will no doubt make you faster. The decals, that is. The wheels, who knows? But the decals, there you go. You can learn more about all of Envy's wheels and components, many of which seem like they're made with the Leadville 100 in mind, but which can handle pretty much anything you throw at them on any terrain. Just go and check out Envy. That's ENVE.com.
Yeah. As long as we're doing games and puzzles, Hottie, I've got a hypothetical question for you. Suppose there were another race exactly like the Leadville 100 in every possible way, but with one difference. the starting line was at sea level. How do you think that would change your race?
Well, I think it would pose a significant problem because the first thing you do off the starting line is descend 400 feet. So before we started climbing St. Kevin's, by my calculation, we'd be 400 feet underwater, which would pose a breathing challenge, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah. I guess we would need to bring snorkels. So let's change the hypothetical a little bit. So we say the lowest point of the race is sea level. Then how would you say the race would be different?
I think there would be a lot more buckles given out, and
Yep.
probably a lot more big buckles too.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would be getting their sub-9 that otherwise have been working on that forever. I don't know if I've ever said it on this podcast. It took me 15 tries to get that big belt buckle. Anyway, I think about that altitude thing is really what makes all the difference in the world. I think I could probably, if this race were at sea level, I could do the entirety of the Columbine climb, no problem, on my bike. I think a lot of people could, and Powerline, maybe even that wouldn't be out of the question for me.
Yeah, Powerline is it just becomes steep. At least it's not at altitude anymore, but the steepness might get you anyhow because it is a really, especially at the bottom, very steep down there. Without question, altitude is the defining feature of the Leadville 100, and it's what makes this race so iconic. Really, Fatty, I doubt you and I would be doing this podcast if this race happened at sea level.
Yeah, it would be just another race instead of a race that gets in our head and sort of lives there forever. And altitude just matters. It's what draws us in. It's what makes us try to figure, this race out all the time and, how we're going to cope with it on the day of the race itself.
And with that in mind, let's check in with our resident nutrition expert. I know it sounds a little different here. Nutrition expert, Roxanne Vogel.
Yeah.
She is GU Energy's Nutrition and Performance Research Manager. And you might say that right now, altitude is definitely top of her mind.
Roxanne, welcome back. I am so excited to ask you some questions this time because I have heard that you are doing the craziest, most awesome altitude, I guess you could say, related effort in the next few weeks. Can we talk about what it is?
Sure. We can totally talk about it.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell us where you're going and what you're doing? And I think maybe you might need to tell us why.
Okay. So, I guess this started about 7 years ago, but I was trekking out in the Himalaya and I went to Everest Base Camp and I looked up and I saw Mount Everest and I said to myself, I need to come back and climb that thing. And so here I am 7 years later, and in a month from today, I will be leaving to climb Mount Everest and attempting to set a record for the fastest ascent door to door, USA to USA. So it's pretty exciting and pretty nerve-wracking at the same time because I don't even know what day I fly out. They basically call me and my bags are packed and sitting in my house and they'll be like, buy your ticket, you're flying today. And like a superhero, I'm out the door.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So I would have Leadville nerves times 20 in that circumstance.
Yeah, it does leave a lot kind of up in the air and you're just sitting here twiddling your thumbs. So it'll be interesting for sure.
Now, Fatty, what makes this attempt unique is, a lot of people go up Everest, and Everest has become kind of this attainable mountain. It's the highest mountain, and it's very dangerous, don't get me wrong. But what makes Roxanne's attempt unique is she is foregoing the weeks and possibly months of acclimatizing at base camp. She's having to do all that here, Roxanne. So how do you now? And that's not, on a smaller level, that's what a lot of us Leadvillers have to do. If we don't live in Leadville at 10,000 feet, we got to find a way to get ready for that altitude. So, Roxanne, what are you doing since you're not going to base camp and sleeping and staying there and going up and down the mountain several times before? What are you doing to get ready for those extreme altitudes you're going to find at Everest?
Well, to be honest, I pretty much live in a bubble. So much of my day is spent either in the altitude tent that is on my bed permanently or in an altitude chamber that we have installed at GU headquarters. So we worked with this company, Hypoxico, to install a little room in our gym where I can stand up and do work or do exercises in there. But yeah, between the chamber and my tent, I try to get over 12 hours a day. So a majority of my day I try to spend at altitudes between anywhere from, 8,000, it can go up to 21,000 if I want to.
Mm. And when you're outside the bubble, what are you doing?
When I'm outside the bubble, I'm doing everything else that I need to do in normal life that I can't do in a chamber. So you can only imagine. But I am actually training really, really hard. And, everything I do these days is in some way kind of related to preparing for this climb.
Are you starting to feel it, the effects?
Of the altitude training?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, definitely some strange things have been going on with just like losing weight unintentionally and kind of being a little bit more just focused, like hyper focused when I'm outside of the chamber. I can really tell a difference in like my cognitive function. So just things like that. But yeah, it's an additional stress on the body. So it's something you really have to monitor, just like you would your training load or anything else that adds stress. It is an additional stress. And so like, I think some of the additional weight loss I've been experiencing has been just from the body working really hard to try and, figure out what's going on with this altitude. Because even when you go to natural altitude, your basal metabolic rate, or how many calories you burn resting, goes up as much as 30%. So that could totally account for the weight loss.
Now,
Yeah.
what could you pass on to folks who don't have all the fancy equipment but want to get ready for altitude? Anything you've learned up to date now that you think might apply to somebody that can't sleep in a chamber or spend time like you are in specific environments?
Totally. And one of the things I actually do as well. So, I should have said this when you asked me earlier, Fatty, what else I do outside the chamber. Heat training. It's really, really cool. You can use heat to activate the same pathways that allow you to acclimate to altitude. So if you do a sauna or a hot bath or a steam shower, any of those things, if you do those about, 3 times a week at least for, say, a minimum of 20 minutes at a time, that will actually help you acclimatize for altitude. It is so neat and so cool. And like, I'm a huge fan because sitting in a sauna is just a really nice way to end a workout.
So how hot is hot enough to make a difference?
A lot of the research that I've seen, it has to be pretty hot. So as hot as you can stand, but at least 140 degrees for sauna and at least 104 degrees Fahrenheit for, say, a hot bath or a hot tub.
Wow.
Yeah.
So our friends in Arizona have got this covered.
Yeah. I mean, it depends. If you're kind of constantly in that hot environment, I don't know if that would be a sufficient stimulus. You might need to go actually sit in a sauna to get hotter. Because the thing is, you need to raise your core temperature a couple of degrees, right? So, but yeah, the heat training thing is so neat that it helps you get ready for altitude. So I highly recommend that. And it really doesn't have to be that long. You can do it in as little as 10 days. But I tend to, like, I've already started doing it, so I'm about a month away from leaving, and I'm doing heat training at least 3 times a week right now.
And is there anything as far as food goes or other nutrition components, supplements that can help us prep for altitude?
Sure. So one of the ones that has the most research behind it is beetroot juice, right? So even a lot of professional teams use it when they go to high altitude. And you can do that. Again, it doesn't have to be super long term, but you could start maybe 2 weeks before you go to altitude, start taking some of those beetroot shot supplements. Those tend to be really highly concentrated. And so that's why I call those ones out. But if you take, those every day leading in for 10 days to 2 weeks before your event, and then like 2 to 3 hours before you actually start your race, those have been shown to improve the way you use oxygen. So you use oxygen more efficiently. So in a low oxygen environment, that's a really big benefit.
Well, folks, I think we've got some great new knowledge here on how to get ready. Yeah, to go to Everest, but I don't think any of us are doing that anytime soon. But for Leadville, I mean, there's some stuff we all can use here. Some heat training, if you've got access to a sauna, maybe some heat training while you're riding as well will help kind of jumpstart your ability to survive at altitude. Some beetroot juice. Yeah, beet juice has become fashionable these days, and certainly it can't be bad for you. Beets are great for you, and who knows, it may help you at the altitude as well. When we meet again with Roxanne, Fatty, have you been to a nutrition store recently, by the way? Have you walked into one of these vitamin stores?
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen all the stuff in there? I mean, I am thoroughly confused. Now, we've talked briefly about supplements with Roxanne in a previous episode. We're going to get back onto this topic, though, because there's a lot to cover. We're going to go shopping, vitamin shopping, supplement shopping with Roxanne Vogel next time we talk with her.
Hey, good luck to Roxanne. I am so looking forward to hearing stories when she gets back.
Me too. All right, let's wrap up season 2, episode 12 of the Leadville podcast, Leadville 100 podcast, that is, presented by Floyd's of Leadville. If you like the show, give us a 5-star rating and review over at Apple Podcasts. Also, share it with your other cycling friends. And please support our sponsors. Let them know you appreciate them making this show possible. Meanwhile, if you have ideas or questions for us, head to the Leadville100podcast.com comment section and get in touch.
Yeah, and follow me on Twitter. I am at Fat Cyclist. Follow Hottie on Instagram. Hottie, what are you on Instagram?
Michael Houghton.
Oh, how easy. Okay.
Yeah.
And you're Michael Houghton on Twitter as well. And you can find both of us on Facebook. We're both very active in the Leadville 100 MTB participants group. If you've got a question, you can DM us, you can tweet to us, you can email us. Oh, we are so connected. It's the world we live in. Anyway, let us know. There's a great chance we'll answer right here on the show.
Good luck in your training. Thanks for listening, and we will see you at the start line.
Less than 3 months, folks.